Hello, welcome to the channel Wise Stories. Enjoy watching.
For the first time, early spring was warm. Usually, at this time, there was still snow on the ground. The car, which had just entered the large village, turned to the right and headed towards the little house. A woman stood there, leaning on a low wooden fence. She was waiting for her son and his wife to come to her. The apple tree, leaning towards the road, had just begun to bud. Everything in the village seemed to come to life with spring. People began to take care of their yards and houses, making plans for planting their gardens and fields. In winter, it was always empty here. Finally, the locals would return from the cities to tend to their country homes. The village would come alive again. A little more, her husband said, gently stroking her knee. She nodded, caressing her large pregnant belly in return. She didn't want to go, especially because of her pregnancy. She didn't want to take the risk, but her husband's mother would be deeply hurt, so it was better to go and give birth somewhere on the road than to endure endless complaints from this woman. "There's her house already," Diego said with a smile. "I don't know, I'm absolutely not happy about this," Josefina replied. She always knew that her husband's mother didn't have much love for her. Fina never demanded any special attention. She didn't like the hypocrisy with which the woman supposedly expressed her love. The car came to a stop near the fence. The woman immediately broke into a smile, opening her arms for hugs. She looked so happy and yet so artificial. Her opinion of her own acting skills was much higher than her actual abilities. "Welcome. I'm so glad to see you. Let's hurry, the food will get cold soon," Senora Pena said. She first approached her son, giving him a firm kiss on the cheek, then moved to his wife. She stroked her belly and asked a few questions, as if caring for the unborn child. Josefina thought that if the elderly woman really cared about the child, she wouldn't have put on a whole performance before their arrival. They sat at the table and had lunch. Josefina felt like a stranger here. No, she tried to engage in conversation, get involved, but the elderly woman was completely absorbed in her child. She almost cooed over her son, treating him as if he were a child. Josefina didn't judge her, she didn't even attempt to fit into their company. As soon as these two were together, it was impossible to separate them. Her son immediately lost all self-care skills, and his mother ran around him day and night. Josefina found it disgusting to watch, mainly because she no longer saw her husband as a man. For her, he became a child who only waited for his mommy to hand him a handkerchief. Josefina got up, excused herself, and went inside. The road had been difficult for her. At this stage, it would have been better if we hadn't gone anywhere. "She'll probably take a nap," Diego said with concern in his voice. "Oh, what a pantywaist, look at her, she's tired from the journey. I was pregnant with you, and I worked like crazy. I went out to the fields and dealt with the horses, and nothing happened to me. And here, she has driven hundreds of miles, and that's it, she's tired." "Or how many miles was it?" the elderly woman asked. "Mom, people are all different. Health and endurance vary too. I could swim across a river ford, but some guy here in the village wouldn't even make it halfway. You can't live by the principle of 'I'm well fed, so others must be too,'" Diego said. His mother waved her hand. She never took his statement seriously. For her, he remained a child whom she taught how to live. Diego used to get annoyed by this, but now he took it calmly. His mother moved closer to her son, and her voice became quieter. "I told you she's not a match for you, freckled, red-haired, like a witch, pale skin, light eyes, not a beauty at all," the elderly woman said. "You had such beautiful women before. Remember Alicia from the neighboring town? She was a beauty, cover-worthy." "Mom, stop it," Diego said. "What's the point if she ran around with other guys? And why should I look at her all day long? No one has ever loved me as much as Fina." "Well, you're a fool. For a man, it's important that others envy him. Let some ordinary guys get ordinary girls. Okay, you could have lived together, that's it. But you had to drag her to the registry office and then even make a child. Seriously, do you really like her? The mother asked. Diego chose to ignore her question. The more he agreed with his mother in the conversation, the more she would let it go. Josefina was right, she shouldn't have gone, but if the young woman hadn't gone, Sonora Pena would have caused a scandal for her son, and Diego didn't want to hear that. This was one of the reasons he brought his wife with him, the main reason. Diego couldn't stand his mother's constant criticism. The more she ranted, the less he argued with her. There was no desire to argue pointlessly. I still can't understand. You used to date a girl from Germany. She was so beautiful, truly amazing. Can you imagine what your children could have been like with her? And this? What is this? It's a good thing your child will be a boy. Looks aren't as important for boys. But if a girl had been born, you'd have struggled with her red hair and freckles later on, the mother said. Mom, please stop. My wife is beautiful to me. I like everything about her. She's so sweet. There's some kind of tenderness about her, you know, something extraordinary. She's wonderful. Besides, you don't know her at all. And believe me, if you don't like something, it doesn't mean others won't like it either, her son responded quite sharply. His mother hushed him. She wanted their conversation to remain confidential. After all, when Josefina reappeared on the horizon, the elderly woman would put on her obligatory smile and pretend to be a loving future grandmother. But you still don't love her, you chose her for comfort, and such relationships will never last long, the mother said. She demonstratively got up and left with a tray filled with empty dishes. Son remained sitting alone. Diego tried not to think about his mother's words, she just liked to chatter. He got up and walked to the wide swing tied to an apple tree. He sat on it, stretched out his legs, and gently rocked back and forth. Strange were his feelings. He remembered childhood. He could hardly recall anything good. The man looked at the house. After all, Diego considered his childhood quite happy, if you didn't think about his alcoholic father and his mother's hysterics, if you didn't think about how happy his mother had become when his father went to the grave. The next day, Josefina stood by the car. It took so long to get here just for a one-day visit. Fina reproached herself for not resisting her husband. Everything had to come to an end. And that conversation, even if it ended in a scandal, had to happen. She felt a sense of gloom due to her own disappointment. And where could she find support if even her husband wasn't on her side? Goodbye, my girl. Have a good boy. Be happy, my dear children, the elderly woman said in a saccharine voice. I'm so glad, Fina, that you two got together. You've had such a positive influence on him. He's become so pliable. Finally, I'll have a wonderful grandchild. Diego felt a rising nausea. Less than a day ago, his mother had given him a lecture about how unhappy she was with his choice of a wife, even after all these years, and now she was suddenly saying she loved her. Even her voice seemed affected and insincere. His mother saw her son's face, but shook her head in disapproval, as if he didn't understand anything. Diego got into the car. Fina carefully sat down, holding her belly. When the car started moving, she felt a strange pulling sensation below. The young woman instantly regretted agreeing to this foolish trip. Oh, come on, Fina. Well, we went, and it was nice, right? We won't be able to travel once the baby is here. Then when the baby is born, there won't be time for trips either. Understand me correctly, she's my mother. I'm sorry, but if your parents were alive, we would have visited them too, right? He said. Yes, you're right. I'm sorry, this trip was just really hard for me, and I'm already dreading the journey back, she said. Josefina decided not to continue the conflict. It was useless, she wouldn't convince her husband of anything. He firmly believed that these trips to his mother were necessary, even at her late stages of pregnancy. Sometimes Josefina thought that even if she lost the baby on such a journey, her husband wouldn't see anything wrong with it. The journey back home was easier than the one to the village. They only stopped a few times. Josefina got out, swayed slightly, walked alongside the car to stretch her legs. Is everything all right with you? Asked the police officer, seeing the car with its hazard lights on. I'm sorry, I have a complicated pregnancy, I can't sit for long. We stopped for literally 5 minutes, the woman said. Everything's fine, don't worry, the police officer said with a smile. Have a safe journey. Diego suddenly thought it was strange to see police officers here, not traffic police. But as soon as they got back into the car, their conversation became completely distracted. He immediately forgot about who they had seen. April arrived unnoticed. The last remnants of snow had appeared. After a warm March, such unexpected changes were unpleasant. The birth was literally just around the corner. Josefina was preparing for the trip. She packed a bag for herself just in case everything started earlier. The sensations were not pleasant. She had been to the hospital several times already, but they had sent her back. When suddenly the doorbell rang, Diego looked at his wife. He wasn't expecting anyone, and neither was she. The man got up and approached the door. "Here I am," shouted Victoria. Hearing her sister's voice, Josefina jumped up as much as she could in her condition. She hadn't seen or heard from her sister in a very long time. They had quarreled so long ago that neither of them probably even remembered the reason. "This is my sister," Josefina said. Vicky stood in the doorway. Dark chestnut hair, dark thin arched eyebrows, she had quite bright makeup, plump lips, slightly tanned skin that gave her a special charm. Vicky was so different from her own sister that Diego was initially taken aback. Vicky shook his extended hand and walked into the apartment. "My girl, how big you've become." "Pregnancy isn't a reason to eat more, my dear," Victoria said. Just kidding, just kidding. Why are you here?" Josefina asked. "My Greek romance ended in nothing. I decided to return to my home country. I saw you on social network, was really surprised your belly is already so big. Fina, this is a great chance for us to reconcile. You understand, right? We're sisters, after all," Victoria said in a sugary voice. "So what? Are you staying with us?" Diego asked. He still looked terribly bewildered. He glanced between his wife and her sister, and, to be honest, Vicky looked much brighter than his wife. "Vicky has her own apartment," Josefina said. Vicky smiled slightly, then nodded. Diego smiled to himself. He didn't want to bring relatives here. His wife's apartment was already not too spacious. "Our parents were stingy with you, my apartment is bigger," Victoria said with a smile. And again, this aggression. Every time Vicky said something hurtful and then pretended it was a joke. Josefina was getting tired of it, even now, but she was glad her child would have an aunt, and she and her sister had needed to make up for a long time. Victoria became a frequent visitor to their apartment. She came almost every day. Josefina and she were getting closer. On the one hand, Diego understood that apart from her sister, Fina had no other relatives, but on the other hand, he found this girl irritating. There was something unpleasant about her. Despite her pleasant appearance, she seemed to secretly offend her sister. He didn't like that at all. "Name him after me, it will be Victor, a conqueror, a beautiful name in reality," Victoria said and laughed. "No, we've already chosen a name, Alejo. When I saw the name on the list, I immediately knew that's what my son would be called. It sounds beautiful, Alejo Dominguez Partis." "I like it," Josefina said with a smile. "Well, something that, the main thing is that you like it. Just some ordinary name, everyone nowadays gets so fancy, naming their sons Berthold, Irvin, and so on," Victoria said. "Yeah, Berthold or Gertrude Dominguez. Let's bring something from War and Peace too," the man said. "Come on, what's with your reaction?" Victoria asked point blank. But Diego didn't intend to engage in an open confrontation. He immediately backed down. Diego decided to leave the apartment while the girls were collecting baby items, sorting, ironing, and arranging them roughly by age. The labor began suddenly in the middle of the night, closer to May. That evening, Josefina already knew that she would be going to the maternity hospital at night. Diego was skeptical of her confidence. Their relationship had suffered a significant crack. In the days leading up to the birth, she was having a hard time, even getting up was difficult. Her husband clearly didn't appreciate her helplessness. Josefina, who had always seen her husband as support and a pillar, was terribly surprised by his reaction. At night, as soon as she woke him up and told him that she was in labor, they immediately rushed to get ready, grabbing the already packed bag. Josefina stayed in the hospital. Diego left because he had to go to work early the next morning. And no matter how much Josefina begged him to take time off at least during the birth, he just brushed it off, saying it was impossible right now. The labor went relatively smoothly, without tears or complications, but the baby was not doing so well. The doctor came, explained that these things happen, and it wasn't the mother's fault. He would observe them for now and then draw conclusions. Josefina was immediately reassured that nothing critical was happening, and such things were not uncommon. The first person to arrive at the maternity hospital was, of course, Vicky. Josefina hadn't expected to see her. She had hoped that her husband would be the first to arrive at the maternity hospital. Vicky came in, acting somewhat judgmental as she looked around the single, cute, albeit modestly furnished room. Why did you need a single room? No place to put your money? Listen, I was just about to ask you, what's going on with this apartment of yours? So, you inherited the rights when you were already married? Victoria asked. I wanted a single room, and I can afford it. Besides, it's much easier for me to stay in the hospital when there are no strangers around, Josefina replied calmly. She felt anxious about not having her baby nearby. There was a feeling that everything inside was growing from worry. That's how it had been ever since they took the baby away for procedures. Yes, I inherited it when I was already married. You remember how many problems we had with that inheritance. Our parents must have wanted us to struggle before we got the property. By the way, what happened to your apartment during the time you were away? Usually, when you leave a place for a long time, it deteriorates quite a bit, Josefina guessed. Vicky reacted strangely, waved it off, quickly said that it wasn't a big deal, everything could be fixed and put in order. But Josefina could see that something had happened. She didn't bother to interrogate her sister further, knowing it would be pointless. How's your husband? Has he been to the maternity hospital yet? And when can we finally see my nephew? Victoria asked, struggling to stay in one place. No, he has a lot of work. He hasn't been here yet. As for the baby, we have some issues. The doctor says they'll probably keep us for a few weeks, and then they'll let us go home, Josefina said. Few weeks? Victoria exclaimed and then immediately clicked her tongue, shaking her head like an old woman who was once again condemning someone. Right now, the most important thing is the baby's health, so I'll stay in the hospital for as long as they say, Josefina quickly added. Yes, you're the mother, you know best. Well, Fina, I also have work. I managed to break away for just a few minutes. I was really glad to see you. If you need anything, call me, I'm available. And your husband is a jerk, of course, for not coming here yet, Victoria said as a parting remark. Soon, she disappeared from the room, leaving only the scent of her expensive perfume, which she had been using for years. Josefina spent the entire day alone in the room. It was strange that husbands often hung around outside the maternity hospital windows, shouting to their loved ones, bringing balloons and food. Josefina was alone as if she didn't have a husband. Fina dialed her husband's phone number, but he didn't pick up. He sent a message saying there was a crisis at work and he'd call back later. But he didn't call back. By the time her husband finally mustered the courage to call his wife, she was asleep. Josefina grabbed the phone and immediately put it to her ear. I'm sorry, dear. I have so much work. I'm shocked by how everything coincided. How are you feeling? How's our little boy? The man asked. His voice lacked tenderness, love, or sympathy. Josefina suddenly thought that she was talking to a robot. She immediately brushed aside these thoughts, attributing them to hormonal fluctuations and her own tendency to imagine problems. They decided to keep us for 2 weeks. There's only 1 week left. Everything is fine with Alex. We just wanted to be cautious. He's so cute. It's a pity you've only seen him in photos. He has your eyes, exactly the same. And he even has a little mole on his neck, just like yours, Josefina said. Fina suddenly felt the overwhelming love in her voice as she talked about her son. Emotions washed over her, and she couldn't believe how intensely she loved someone. In a week? Well, all right, then. I'll get the room ready by that time. Although, no, I think I'll start tomorrow, just in case you manage to come back earlier, the man calmly said. Josefina could hear the coldness in his voice. After the call, she couldn't sleep for a long time. There was a constant, nagging feeling inside her that she had made a mistake or done something wrong. Fina didn't even notice when she fell asleep. Her milk never came in. They said it happens sometimes. Nobody made her suffer. The doctor calmly prescribed formula. 2 days later, the doctor entered the room. Josefina was startled by fear. She felt ashamed of her reaction, but having a doctor enter her room in the morning was unusual. Something must have happened. Don't worry, everything is fine, the doctor said with a smile. And don't be concerned about your emotions. Your hormones will normalize soon, and everything will be okay. I came to tell you that your son is perfectly healthy. If you want, I can discharge you today. The doctor paused and then, taking a deep breath, seemed to muster the courage to confess. Josefina couldn't see any guilt in his face. There are a lot of patients, and they pay very little. Your baby is perfectly fine. I don't see any reason to wait another week. We've done everything we can. The baby is completely healthy. The on-duty doctor can monitor his condition from now on, the man said. I can wait a few days for you to arrange for your discharge. Or can you discharge me today? Josefina almost shouted, jumping up. I can, the doctor said with a smile. You seem to be tired of the hospital. I don't see the point in staying here. We have a newborn photo session very soon, and that's where we'll take pictures, Josefina said as she walked out of the room with the doctor. Josefina was so happy that she was finally getting out of the hospital that everything else faded into the background. She felt a sense of elation inside her. She carefully dressed her baby, put him in a blanket, and finally left the hospital. Someone was having their picture taken on the hospital steps. Josefina smiled and walked to the taxi waiting nearby. She couldn't wait to get behind the wheel of her beloved car. She was going home, and her husband would be overjoyed. And if he wasn't at home, Josefina was planning a romantic surprise for him. The taxi arrived at her apartment building surprisingly quickly. The baby didn't even wake up during the ride. After the procedure, he always slept soundly and for a long time, and the last procedure had just been done before Josefina's discharge. Josefina couldn't take her eyes off her son. He seemed to her the most beautiful and perfect thing in the world. She was melting as she looked at him. Josefina began to say when she entered the apartment, but she heard the unmistakable moans, something she couldn't mistake for anything else. Josefina felt a painful surge somewhere in her chest. The pain was as if her heart had shattered into dozens of pieces and crumbled away. Her soul cracked open, and the pain only intensified. When Fina burst into the bedroom, she saw Victoria, wrapped in a sheet, hurriedly getting dressed. She also saw her husband, completely bewildered. It's not what it looks like, Fina, please wait, her husband suddenly spoke quickly. His voice was trembling with fear, and he seemed completely unprepared for his wife's arrival, naturally attempting to shift the blame onto her to absolve himself of any responsibility. Victoria practically flew out of the apartment almost instantly. On her way out, she was putting on a t-shirt, not saying a word and simply ignoring Josefina's presence. Please, let me explain, Fina, it's not what it seems. I was just foolish, you understand, the man said. Josefina stood there, rooted to the spot, holding the blanket with her newborn son in her arms. Her eyes were filled with tears, and she couldn't believe the intensity of her pain. She couldn't say a word. Everything inside her felt like it was shattering, and the pain was only getting worse. When Fina entered the room, she felt a painful sensation in her chest, as if her heart had shattered into dozens of pieces and fallen away. She held back her nausea, but only for a moment. Now, even in her own apartment, everything seemed alien to her. Her husband was saying something, but she couldn't hear it. The noise in her ears was driving her crazy. It felt as if her brain had frozen, preventing her from thinking. Fina couldn't utter a single word. All her words, even her own voice, seemed to be trapped inside her. "Fina, please, just listen to me. I know I messed up, but I can't make sense of it myself. You see, I panicked. Everything happened so fast." Her husband repeated the same rehearsed phrases. It felt as if he had broken her favorite vase and was now trying to justify himself. But Josefina couldn't care less about the vase or her husband's words. She texted her friend. Violetta said she would leave work immediately and come over. Deciding not to speak to her husband anymore, Josefina packed a suitcase full of her things and, with her baby, walked out onto the street. He didn't even follow her. While Josefina was packing, her husband kept muttering the same excuses. Apparently, he couldn't come up with anything else. Fina was afraid her sister might start calling and apologizing, but that didn't happen. It seemed that her sister realized her mistake and was now waiting for the right time to have a proper conversation. Violetta's car arrived much faster than Josefina had expected. Her friend looked furious, casting hateful glances at the apartment windows where she had seen Diego's pale face. "Give me the baby and get in," Violetta said. Fina got into the car and then took her baby in her arms. Violetta waited for a few seconds, hoping her friend's husband would come out, but he never did. He chickened out. "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything," her friend said. Josefina was grateful for having such a close friend. If it weren't for Violetta, she would be alone in the apartment with her husband right now. And what? Listen to his stupid excuses? Tears welled up in Josefina's eyes. She had been standing there like a statue earlier, but now the tears were flowing freely. Violetta let her cry it out. Over the next couple of hours, Violetta brought a crib and a dresser from online listings. They were both somewhat old but sturdy. The baby, who had cried almost immediately upon their arrival, had now been fed, calmed down, and was sleeping soundly. Josefina still had the image in her mind, the disheveled marital bed, her guilty-looking husband, her own sister covering herself with a sheet. It played in her head over and over again. Josefina would give anything to erase this memory forever. Violetta helped a lot. She bought formula, diapers, and organized a nice, secluded spot for the baby. She even brought a folding screen. At times, she stayed up at night to let Josefina get some sleep. And now, in the evening, when the baby had finally fallen asleep, they could sit in the kitchen, have a drink, and talk. 2 half-filled glasses were in front of them. They didn't intend to get drunk, they just wanted to spend some quality time together. Sushi boxes, a cheese platter, and, most importantly, silence. The baby had been quite fussy lately, and Josefina felt guilty that her friend couldn't get a proper night's sleep because of her child. "Everything will get better. What do you think you'll do next? Go back to your husband after what he did?" Violetta asked. Josefina shook her head in disagreement. She didn't know what to do herself. Her mind was filled with various scenarios. On one hand, forgiving infidelity, especially with her own sister in their marital bed, seemed foolish. Fina didn't know how to proceed. If she forgave him, the cheating would likely continue. If a person doesn't value fidelity from the beginning, they won't value it later. On the other hand, they had just had a son. By the way, she didn't refuse her husband's marital duties until her labor. Everything had been the same as before until then, so leaving him because he felt neglected wouldn't work. Josefina looked at her friend. Violetta understood that her friend couldn't make a straightforward decision. Don't rush things too much. I'm glad you're here, and taking care of the little one doesn't bother me at all. But this can't go on forever, right? This is your apartment. Of course, you could wait for a divorce, but that's your decision to make. Understand me correctly, I can't advise you on how to handle things in someone else's family, Violetta said. I don't even understand how to handle things in my own family. It's like my brain has atrophied. I can't figure out what to do next. It's just a constant feeling of nausea, white noise in my ears, and a throbbing vein on my forehead. And I keep seeing them sleeping in our bed over and over again. Can it really be that I went through all of this? Everything was fine between us. I don't understand, she said. Josefina lowered her head. Her biggest suffer was not knowing. She really couldn't comprehend why her husband had treated her this way. Various scenarios were playing out in her mind, but she couldn't find any justification for his actions. I think he'll come back soon. Give it a few days, he'll think things over and come back with flowers, asking for forgiveness. Stay here and let them both think about what they've done, Violetta said. Josefina nodded. It was probably best to leave everything as it was for now. Violetta didn't know how to help her friend, but if there was any way she could assist her, she would do it without hesitation. Violetta's heart ached for her friend, and she couldn't shake the feeling that this situation was incredibly inappropriate. Early in the morning, Josefina felt her friend waking her up. She thought something might be wrong with the baby and got up immediately. The baby had cried all night, and Fina had hardly slept. Shoo, everything's fine. Your husband's here. I need to go to work. Can you handle this on your own, or do you want me to stay? Violetta asked. Josefina nodded, indicating that she could handle it herself. She looked out the window and signaled to her husband that she would be out soon. He glanced at her disheveled head and her face, swollen from lack of sleep. Diego grimaced. He was afraid to say the things he had prepared in advance right now. Don't attack him too harshly. Let him speak his mind. Of course, there's no excuse for what he did, and he acted like a complete jerk. But if deep down you want to reconcile with him, let him express himself. I can't guarantee it will ease your soul, Violetta advised. What would you do in this situation? How would you handle it? Josefina asked. Violetta paused for a moment, looking at her friend as if deep in thought. I would tell him to go to hell, and I would never let him near me again. He could communicate with the child without any issues since he's the father and all sort of things, but typically, these jerks don't care about their kids either. You know how they think an ex-wife means an ex-child. They have no responsibility at all, they just live as they please, Violetta said. She got herself together and was the first to exit the building, heading towards her car. Violetta didn't say a word to Diego. She had promised her friend that she wouldn't create a scene outside, but if it were up to Violetta, she would have unleashed her wrath on the man who had treated her friend so cruelly. Josefina tried to make herself look presentable as best she could. She had hardly slept for the past few nights, and dark circles had formed under her eyes. Taking care of the baby on her own, despite Violetta's help, had been challenging. Fina realized that if her husband found the right words, she might have to forgive him. For the sake of their child, she would suppress all these feelings and doubts and believe in him again. Josefina set up the baby monitor and went down to her husband. She thought he would ask about their son. However, Diego didn't even mention their child. He stood before her, fidgeting like a first grader at a first school day, holding a crumpled bouquet. He handed her the flowers, then crossed his arms over his chest. Diego uncrossed his arms, hiding them behind his back, and then put them in his pocket. He fidgeted as if he were preparing for something serious. Josefina had a bad feeling about this. You begged me for a child, Josefina said. I told you I wanted to continue working and build my career. You practically begged me for a child. You didn't come for the birth, and you didn't come afterward. But when I came home, I found out you were sleeping with my own sister. Where's the logic in that? Josefina finally asked the question she had been longing to ask, looking at her husband, but he couldn't say anything in response. He averted his gaze, searching for some support. I just realized that I wasn't ready for a family and a child. I imagined how difficult it would be, and I decided I didn't want a family. Damn it, just like that, he said. His expression appeared offended. It seemed as if he hadn't just cheated on his wife, but that she had deeply hurt him. Diego loved to play the victim. Being at fault but shifting the responsibility to someone else seemed to be a skill he had learned from his mother. Josefina remembered his mother and the fact that she hadn't even congratulated her on the birth of her grandchild, simply ignoring the photo of her grandson in the messenger. In fact, Josefina hadn't expected anything more. So, what should I do with the child now? Put him back where he came from? Since you've decided you're not ready for a family. You've conveniently settled yourself, Josefina said. Let's not argue. I came here to have a civilized conversation, the man said. Only now did Josefina sense alcohol on his breath. It seemed he had been celebrating the birth of her child with her sister. Fina had been living with her friend for several days, worrying that she was inconveniencing her, yet her husband hadn't even mentioned freeing the apartment. Let's make a deal, you and I. I'll leave you this apartment in exchange for child support. You can move into the apartment and live there. I'll give it up on paper, but I won't pay child support, the man said. He spoke it all in one breath, and it appeared to be the serious topic he had come here to discuss. However, Josefina burst into laughter, a hysterical laugh. She looked at her husband and just couldn't believe that this was the man she had once been in love with. Have you lost your mind? This is my apartment. You're negotiating with me over my own apartment? Have you completely lost it because of my sister? Josefina asked, astonished. Even if she were given 10 attempts, she would never have guessed that the conversation would turn to the apartment. During all this time, Diego hadn't even mentioned their son. And this was the man who had begged her to have a child, and then he suddenly backed out. Was that even possible? All these questions kept racing through Josefina's mind. She physically felt her love for this man dying. You got it when we were married. Marital property is divided in divorce, so I'm giving you the apartment, and you don't file for child support, the man repeated his statements word for word. Inheritance is not divided in divorce, Josefina quickly responded. You messed up. I wouldn't be surprised if my sister had manipulated you. If she tells you she's a lawyer, don't believe her, she dropped out of law school. You'll pay child support, my dear, Josefina said. Fina, don't ruin my life. Let's make a deal, the man yelled. Josefina had no intention of talking to him any further. She went into the building and up to the apartment. The young woman collapsed on the couch and burst into loud sobs. She buried her face in a pillow and screamed, unable to express her pain any other way. She screamed so loudly that she frightened herself with her own hysteria. The baby woke up. She needed to pull herself together. Could her husband really just walk out on their family, claiming he was tired of it all? She couldn't do that. Now Fina was ready to live for the sake of her child. What irritated her the most was that her husband hadn't even mentioned their son. He didn't care. He talked about child support, the apartment, anything but his own son. When Violetta came home and Josefina told her everything, she wasn't surprised at all. Violetta pursed her lips, indicating that this was a typical situation. Fina, you need to come to terms with the fact that you're on your own. Well, of course, you have me, but you don't have a husband anymore. We need to figure out what to do next, how to get you back into your own apartment. Hopefully, we'll come up with something, Violetta said. He didn't even ask about Alex, he didn't even ask about his own son, just for politeness' sake. He decided to avoid child support at the expense of my apartment. I just don't get it, Josefina said, shrugging her shoulders. Her gaze was utterly lost. Violetta knew that her friend would need time to recover. Fina, Violetta said, sitting her friend down on the couch and taking her hand. You can't rely on anyone in this world, especially not on men in this country. They're here today, gone tomorrow, like little boys. They have no concept of conscience, responsibility, or masculinity. They're only interested in their own amusements. That's it. You need to pull yourself together. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your child. Don't count on his help. Josefina nodded. Violetta was right. Fina had already tried to apply for benefits, but none of her applications had been approved. The recalculation was for the last 6 months, and during that time, Josefina had been working, so she wasn't eligible for any government assistance. Josefina sat on the couch for hours, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what to do next. Violetta was right about one thing: she needed to pull herself together and not rely on anyone else's help. Her husband didn't call for days. He still didn't inquire about their son's condition, even though he knew the baby had faced health issues since birth. Violetta tried to comfort her friend and provide support. With each passing day, Josefina grew stronger and better at taking care of her child. If her husband had decided to wage war against her, she was ready to fight back. She would obtain a divorce, secure child support, and make him financially responsible for the child he had so eagerly wanted. After his last conversation with his wife, Diego felt like a fool. His mistress had completely messed with his head. Vicky had insisted that inherited property was divided in divorce if it had been acquired during the marriage. But his wife's words had planted doubts in him. Maybe it was true, maybe nothing would be divided. Diego felt like an idiot. He had a family, a wife, and an expected child, but then he chickened out like a little boy. Diego tried to convince himself that he wasn't ready for a family or a child, constantly finding excuses. Thankfully, his mother had supported him mentally through all of this. If it weren't for her support, he might have gone back to his wife. "Well, Senor Dominguez," the lawyer said as he entered the office. He was a chubby man with thin mustaches that did little to improve his flushed face. When the lawyer smiled, his eyes narrowed into tiny slits. Diego had a strong aversion to overweight people, but now he had to suppress his prejudices to get the information he needed. "We seem to have a divorce on the horizon, and I'd like to know about the property," Diego said. "All property acquired during the marriage will be divided equally. The exceptions are gifts and inheritances. They remain the property of the recipient," the lawyer said, almost quoting the legal code. He deliberately simplified the phrasing, seeing that his client wasn't in the mood for a serious discussion. "Wait, but she inherited the apartment during our marriage. We were already married when she received it from her parents," Diego quickly responded. "That doesn't matter. It's inherited property, and it's not subject to division. The apartment belongs to your wife and will continue to belong to her after the divorce. Do you have any other questions?" "You still have some time," the lawyer asked. His oily smile made this person look entirely unappealing. Diego could no longer contain his disgust, but it seemed that the lawyer was completely indifferent to his client's emotions. He had already received his fee for the consultation, and he had no interest in this man's inner turmoil. "How can I avoid paying child support? The child was just born, and I was listed in the birth certificate as the legal husband. So, it seems I'll have to pay child support. I wanted to exchange the apartment for child support, but now it turns out that it can't be divided," the man said. The lawyer smirked. Diego clearly hadn't expected this reaction. He puffed himself up, ready to defend himself. "Wait, let's go over the situation in detail. You're the husband, right? Your wife gave birth to a child less than a week ago, and you already want to divide her inherited apartment? You want to avoid child support? Am I understanding this correctly?" the lawyer asked. It seemed like he was trying to find any button to trigger some sense of masculinity in Diego, but he couldn't. Diego nodded as if everything were business as usual. "I just realized I'm not ready for a family, not ready to be a father." "You understand?" the man exclaimed. "What difference does it make whether you're ready or not when the child is already here? You're already a father. Or not?" the lawyer asked. Don't try to teach me about life. I have a young lover. I have my whole life ahead of me. I want to live normally, not to pay my money God knows for what for 18 years, said the man. The lawyer shook his head disapprovingly. Diego stormed out of the office, utterly frustrated. He had hoped to find at least one solution to his questions. He would have been relieved to have even a slight chance of executing his plans. However, nothing of the sort happened. He was left without answers, and he had to figure out how to explain this to Vicky. Diego returned home, and from the look on his face, Victoria could immediately tell that something was wrong. It seemed that Vicky had miscalculated. She should have continued her education to have more knowledge. Now, she was in a real panic. Vicky had expected to obtain that apartment or at least relieve her lover of child support. She had been relying on his salary and had no other financial plan. To be honest, when Victoria first came to her sister's place, she hadn't expected to end up sleeping with her sister's husband. Her initial plan had been entirely different. She had intended to take advantage of her sister's weakness after giving birth, declare a legal war against her, try to claim the apartment, and prove that their parents had left everything to Victoria. She had prepared meticulously, gathering documents, forging all the papers and signatures. However, as soon as she had taken all this to a legal firm, they had thrown her out, almost threatening to report her to the prosecutor's office. So, that plan had been a failure. But when she saw her husband, who turned out to be fairly well off and quite gullible, her plan changed. Victoria was now hoping to use him to get the apartment, and now she also counted on having a man who would provide for her. Diego didn't tell his mistress what he had found out about the apartment. He lied, saying they needed to think it over and consult a lawyer, who would then inform him about everything. At that moment, hope burned brighter than ever before. Vicky jumped up and down, clapping her hands. Her thoughts were solely focused on how well she would live once the situation finally stabilized. I saw your face, and I thought everything was lost. But could I be so stupid as to forget the basic rules of property division? Right? Victoria burst out laughing. Diego marveled at how confident she was. She had planned to strip her own sister of her apartment right after giving birth and saw nothing wrong with it. He envied her self-assuredness. When she hugged him, he felt a surge of love for her, but whether that love was genuine was an entirely different question. We have to hold on until the divorce. You need to persuade her to agree to a divorce by any means necessary. Without her consent, no one will divorce you within the first year of the child's birth, and even then, you'll have to go through the magistrate, even if everything is in order, Victoria said. She immediately pulled out her phone, checked some articles, but shook her head negatively. Vicky was confident that there was always a loophole in the law to bypass government regulations. But one morning, Victoria began to doubt her own words. She hadn't slept all night, reading articles about property not being divided. However, since her lover said he had an agreement with a lawyer, she had to trust him. Nevertheless, Victoria didn't like it when someone took full initiative. Vicky decided to hedge her bets. After some time, Victoria was ready. I need to get some household chemicals, she told her lover. He was still waking up, having breakfast, getting ready for work. The man didn't see anything suspicious in her preparations, but in reality, Victoria was planning to visit her biological sister. She needed to have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. By the time Vicky got into the taxi, her confidence was fading. She feared her sister might throw a fit. And if that happened, Vicky wouldn't be able to handle it openly. Sneak attacks were her style, but open confrontation was not her forte. When she arrived, getting out of the car was terrifying. She saw her sister, pushing a stroller. Victoria gathered her courage and finally stepped out of the car. She smiled at her sister and waved as if nothing had happened. Josefina, upon seeing her, didn't react to the greeting at all. Vicky cursed under her breath. She knew she had to act confidently now. No one could guarantee that this conversation would go smoothly. "Why did you come?" Josefina asked. Fina had already pictured how Vicky would apologize, saying she didn't know what had come over her. But for the second time, Josefina had misjudged someone. "I need you to formally waive alimony. If you don't do that, I'll make your life miserable. Just wait and see." "He doesn't need this child. He'll renounce his parental rights through the courts," Victoria declared. She blurted out these words in one breath, as if she had rehearsed them. Josefina immediately realized that Vicky had memorized these phrases. But as soon as the memorized phrases ran out, Vicky became lost. Her eyes started darting around. Only now did Fina notice how much Vicky resembled her husband. Apparently, they were indeed made for each other. "Don't meddle where you're not wanted," Josefina said. "No, that won't work. You decided not to keep the family, you didn't forgive him. Men like him don't just fall from the sky. He works, he doesn't drink, he doesn't raise his hand, and he earns decently, maybe even has some prospects. And you just rejected him in one moment," Victoria said. "This shouldn't concern you at all. You intruded into our family, destroyed it, and now you're making me the guilty one." "Vicky, I have absolutely no interest in this conversation," Josefina said, turned the stroller around, and rolled it into the park. Vicky immediately jumped after her. She walked alongside her sister, almost side by side. Passers-by would never have thought that they were sisters. They were very different from each other. "Do you really not understand that you should give up for my happiness?" Vicky said. Josefina was almost choked by such audacity. She was stunned by her sister's statements. What did Victoria expect from her in the first place? That Josefina would bow down to her, give up on alimony, and live somewhere in the back while they were in her apartment? "Pack your things and get out of my apartment. That's first. Second, I don't want to see you around me anymore. Third, if he wants to give up his rights, let him do whatever he wants. Fourth, go to hell, both of you," Josefina barked. Now Vicky didn't follow her. It was pointless to say or explain anything. Victoria remained standing, watching her sister leave. Josefina's slender figure moved with the stroller under the shade of green trees. The girl was disappointed that her sister didn't give in so quickly. As far as Vicky remembered Josefina, she should have backed down almost immediately. Besides, if Fina had let go of her husband so easily, she could have easily let go of his money. Apparently, Josefina had other plans for the future. Vicky stood there for a few minutes, then finally left, deciding to go home. She wouldn't tell her lover about their conversation. In any case, Vicky didn't regret trying to cover her tracks. Josefina walked through the park, thinking about the conversation that had happened a few hours ago. She needed to go back to the apartment, even with the police if necessary, but she had to. She couldn't constantly inconvenience Violetta. Although her friend pretended to be very happy about their arrival, ready to live together with them forever, she was getting tired. Vivi wanted to come home from work, have a cup of coffee, take a hot bath, and simply enjoy life, but all of this was hardly achievable with a newborn baby in the apartment. 2 weeks had passed since Josefina moved in with her friend. It was time to take action. "Fina?" suddenly exclaimed a familiar voice. Josefina turned and saw her boss. A full-bodied woman with crimson lips immediately approached her with a hug. "Congratulations, my dear. Oh my God, what a little boy. Absolutely adorable. Lord bless you, the cutest little angel. Fina, we have problems. I was just about to call you today. It's amazing how the Lord arranged this," the boss said. She asked if Josefina was breastfeeding, but she shook her head negatively. The boss immediately stepped aside and returned with 2 large coffee cups. She smiled broadly, but her expression was guilty. "Fina, Miriam left for a competitor. The position is hanging like, God forgive me, excrement in an ice hole. I can't appoint anyone and no one can handle it. We urgently need a project manager, right now. I understand you've just had a baby, but I have absolutely no one else to rely on. You'll manage, I'm sure of it," the boss said. Josefina felt as if she had split into 2 parts inside. On the one hand, returning to work would be great, but on the other hand, how would she manage with the baby all this time? You'll continue to receive maternity pay, and I'll pay your salary for the new position directly to you. You'll work remotely from home. You're good at organizing everything. You'll only need about 4, maybe a maximum of 6 hours to normalize all processes. More at first, of course, but you know how it's done. You wanted to advance to this position yourself. After all, the boss began to persuade her. I'm ready, but not right away, Josefina said, without even having time to think. There was no time to think. The gods have heard my prayers. How wonderful it is that I met you, Fina. The only person who can take on so much and handle it all calmly. Let's start in a week. Okay? I'll send you everything by email for now. You can take a look and prepare somehow. Oh, my girl, I'm so happy, exclaimed the boss. Josefina herself was very pleased to have the chance to return to work and normal income. The chance that her husband would eventually wake up and start paying alimony was minimal, and Josefina needed to somehow survive on minimal assistance. But with this job, she could work, take care of the baby, and if it got too difficult, she could hire a nanny for a few hours. The prospect of returning to financial independence was wonderful. The boss believed it was all God's providence, but Josefina actually thought that God had sent her boss to her exactly. Apparently, someone up there knew that Fina would urgently need money to support herself and her child. Vicky was sitting in the car, feeling quite nervous. They were heading to his mother's house. Apparently, the man wanted to secure her support. Victoria knew there would probably be a scandal, but she didn't expect to be met with such aggression. When the car stopped, Vicky got out. She looked around the small rural house with obvious disdain, and the elderly woman couldn't hide her disdain either. Let's go home. I don't want to stay here, especially overnight. And don't you dare to tell me there's an outdoor toilet here. Just perfect, Victoria said in an annoyed tone. Look at you, a city girl. I have a normal toilet and a bathroom inside the house. If you have nothing but stereotypes in your head, it doesn't mean that's how life is. Diego, where did you get her? Where's Fina? The elderly woman almost shouted. She had hoped her son would bring a new girl who would definitely please her. She had already imagined a modest girl who wouldn't even dare to open her mouth in front of her mother-in-law, and then a girl arrived who acted as she pleased. To say that the elderly woman was shocked by her son's choice would be an understatement. Vicky, be more modest, Diego said almost in a whisper. Yeah, right, Vicky retorted rudely. Well, no, go run to my sister if you need a modest good girl. He's fine with sleeping with me, but when we're in public, suddenly I'm not good enough. Right? Vicky demonstratively sat back in the car. The man took the keys and went into the house with his mother. He needed to talk to her about the near future and how to resolve the issue of alimony. His mother audibly sighed when he told her everything. I did tell you that Fina wasn't right for you, but what you brought instead of her is a nightmare on legs. Do you think she'll make you happy, son? She's got a bad head, and she's Fina's own sister, to boot. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as it turns out, it can roll all the way to the bottom, the elderly woman added. The man just nodded. He thought he could find common ground with his mother on this issue, but apparently not. He explained again about the alimony and that he wanted to take the apartment. His mother called someone she knew right in front of him, then someone else, but no one wanted to take on the case because it was absolutely hopeless. You won't get the apartment. You won't get anything at all, you haven't invested anything there. And voluntarily giving up your parental rights won't be easy unless she supports your initiative, and even then, the chance is slim. Listen, son, we all walk under God. Aren't you afraid that fate will punish you for abandoning your wife and child? Your son is growing up there, not just a doll. Mom, Diego interrupted. It was obviously frustrating for him to talk about this. He sighed heavily, leaned back in his chair, and the chair creaked unpleasantly. The man looked at his hands, feeling his own helplessness. Had he really messed up so badly that reconciling with his wife was no longer an option? The divorce process was in full swing, but he hadn't told his lover or his mother about it. "Listen, son, I'm not the best person in the world, and I've given Fina a hard time, but I think if I talk to her, you might get forgiveness. Right now, go home, kick this girl out of the apartment. I'll talk to Fina. After that, you'll go to her with flowers. Buy an expensive ring, even if you have to get on your knees and beg for forgiveness," the woman said. "So that I can take responsibility for someone else for the rest of my days? Well, not for the rest of my days, but for the next 18 years, I'm not ready," the man said. "What does it matter if you're ready or not?" Senora Pena said impatiently. She didn't expect her son to behave like this at all. Where had he suddenly found this attitude? "I've already said it all. I'm not ready for a child, not ready for family life. It's too early for me. I imagined everything completely differently. Then I went to see my friend and saw what a little child is like. He's crying all the time, you can't understand anything, it's scary to pick him up. And then what? Shake because of him for the rest of my life?" The son shouted in response. "So the woman has to shake just because you chickened out?" His mother shouted back. "That's in your blood. Show me which erythrocytes in my blood are responsible for parenting, then. It's nonsense that men made up to justify themselves, and women end up being blamed. Your father was the same. Are women bearing children for themselves? Yes? Done well for yourself. I'm ashamed that you're my son," Senora Pena exclaimed. "I barely tolerated your wife because of my bad temper, but now I would give anything for you to stay together. You can't imagine how hard it'll be for her alone. And you brought some disposable girl into my house. She's not even worth marking, she's just a SL. Mom," Diego shouted and rushed outside. Victoria was pleased to note that their relationship would not be as rosy as her lover had portrayed. If she could distance him from his mother's influence, all the money would flow to her. Vicky already envisioned how she would inspire the man as he climbed the career ladder. Right now, they would take the apartment, and things would get easier from there. Vicky was determined to fight tooth and nail in court to ensure her future husband didn't have to pay alimony. Since she had latched onto this man, she would fight like a furious to the end. Diego got into the car. His mother stood on the porch, muttering to herself and shaking her head. "I thought she would support us. My father was in the military, she always had connections, lots of people on her side. She's turned against me," the man grumbled. He started the car, and it finally left the village behind. Victoria sighed, no longer regretting her decision to come with him. Diego was simply unhappy that he had shown up here with his lover. He had wanted to demonstrate to his mother that everything was going well on his personal front, but now it turned out that his mother wasn't happy for him. Diego was furious. He had kept many secrets from his lover. He intended to talk to her, but he lacked the courage. "Listen," Victoria began. Diego didn't like her tone. It seemed as though she was trying to choose her words carefully. He didn't like how she had been acting lately. The road was uneasy. Drivers seemed to think they were expert drivers, driving recklessly. He was already nervous and didn't want to listen to her. Diego worried about how Victoria would react to the news about their current situation. "Let me call my ex-husband. He's a tough guy, but he might be able to help. Besides, he has connections too. He never refuses me, even though we're divorced," she said calmly. But Diego shook his head negatively. He knew that nothing could change the situation. When he explained the situation to Victoria, she would realize that there was no help coming. "We're not going to get anything. Inherited property doesn't get divided. The lawyer said I couldn't do anything. I can't even give up my parental rights to avoid paying child support," he said. "What?" Victoria exclaimed. She looked at him with frightened eyes, not sure if he was telling the truth or deliberately provoking her emotions. "I've known this for several days. We need to vacate the apartment," Diego said calmly. "Take me home," Victoria said. She didn't speak another word for the rest of the trip. Victoria couldn't believe how badly she had miscalculated. She had hoped that there was at least some chance her plan would work out in the end, but nothing had gone their way. At least she had a chance to get something from this man in the future. He didn't take her home. Diego brought her to the apartment where they were currently living. They had to pack their things. Diego asked his friend to help with the move. A small truck was supposed to arrive in a couple of hours. And what? Are we just going to leave for nowhere? I hope you at least have your own place. Victoria asked. You have a place, Diego said calmly. Have you gone mad? Unlike my sister, I'll never let anyone into my home. No place to live, don't start a family. This is crazy, you were planning to lean on me? Victoria yelled. She had no intention of discussing the matter calmly. Her carefully laid out plan was falling apart before her eyes. She wasn't angry at herself, only at him, the situation, and her sister. Everyone around her was to blame, and only Victoria was a victim of circumstances. From the outside, it seemed like she had done everything perfectly, but life had decided to teach both of them a lesson. We'll live at your place for a couple of days, then I'll start looking for a place to rent. Stop yelling, my head hurts even without you, Diego said. Ah, you have a headache? Is there anything else that hurts? How can you not afford an apartment with such a job? Victoria exclaimed in dismay. Well, because Fina got me this job just 6 months ago, the man confessed honestly. It was at this moment that it dawned on Vicky that she didn't know this man at all. She felt extremely uncomfortable. He couldn't even find a job on his own, and he had no prospects. Victoria didn't even know what to do anymore. She bit her lips, ran various thoughts through her mind, and felt nauseous. She hastily packed their things into bags, tied them up, and moved them to the door. Giving up now was not an option. If Victoria admitted to herself now that she had messed up, there was a high probability that she would never forgive herself. Moreover, if Victoria admitted defeat now, she would have to accept her own guilt in this. It was all too much for her to handle. When they had packed their things and taken them downstairs, Victoria still didn't speak to him. Her friend, who had no idea what was happening in Diego's family, looked at the strange girl with surprise. I don't get it. Where's Fina? The friend asked, peering into the open entrance door, as if Josefina were about to come out any minute. She'll come to her apartment soon, when I leave, Diego said. The man got into his car. He had already given the address where the things needed to be taken. Victoria still didn't speak to him. If you leave now, everything will have been in vain. I don't want it to be in vain. I lost my wife and child because of you, and if you want to just walk away from me, it won't work, Diego said. Victoria nodded. She agreed that if they went their separate ways now, everything would be in vain. They entered the apartment quietly, without any arguments, tantrums, or confrontations. Victoria lived in a small apartment, hardly larger than a tiny studio. This didn't match what she had previously told Josefina. Fina said her sister got an apartment 1.5 times bigger. Diego's question was ignored. Josefina only arrived at her apartment the next day. First, her friend Violetta went there, arranged for cleaning, and made sure all the mess from those two had been removed. She even hired 2 of her acquaintances to rearrange the furniture in the bedroom. This way, there would be fewer reminders of what had happened. Josefina was very grateful to her friend. She didn't know how to express her gratitude. Violetta kept waving it off, saying that's what friends are for. Josefina couldn't imagine how she would live here alone now. It was inconceivable that everything had changed so drastically. Just a month ago, she had been here with her husband, sitting on the couch, laughing. He had said that if she laughed so much, he would give birth right here in the apartment that had made her laugh even more. How could this man betray her like this? Josefina had always believed that her husband was nothing like the kind of person who could cheat on her. For her, this man was dead. I'll come by whenever I can. I'd love to come more often, but you understand me too, Violetta said apologetically. Vivi, I'll be grateful to you for the rest of my life for everything you've done for me. If it weren't for you, I'd be lost. Now it's time to learn to live independently. I have a job, I have income, and my little son is with me. There's no need to complain, Vivi, Josefina said with a smile on her face. Violetta was pleased to see that her friend was handling everything stoically. After all, it wasn't the end of the world. Yes, it was hard and scary, but not fatal. Fina was no longer alone. She needed to take care of herself and her little son. Perhaps that's what gave her so much strength. When Violetta left, Josefina was left alone with her son. Fina put the child to sleep, and he began to fuss, completely exhausted from the journey. When complete silence reigned, Fina lay down on the couch and just stared at the ceiling. She was alone in the apartment again, but now her husband wouldn't come back from a business trip, he wouldn't bring flowers or a funny teddy bear from somewhere to cheer her up. He had rented a fire truck to come up to her floor and propose to her. He courted her beautifully, gave her flowers and gifts. He was there when she was sick. How could he cheat after all of that? Josefina had no answers to these questions, and now, several days later, she decided not to ask them anymore. Fina quickly adapted to working while fitting into her son's schedule. She had less sleep, but she could flexibly manage her hours, and the income more than compensated for the inconvenience. Violetta came several times a week, taking the child along with the stroller, and Josefina had a few hours of peace. Living alone with a child wasn't as scary as she had initially thought. She skillfully handled her responsibilities and was only waiting for the day of the divorce. The young woman mentally prepared herself for the possibility that her husband might create a scene or try to persuade her to come back, or maybe he would come with Vicky and they would mock her. And so, the long-awaited day arrived. The first time, the divorce was postponed because her husband disrupted it, but this time, the court would be on her side. Josefina drove there feeling completely calm. Despite having imagined all the worst-case scenarios, everything went smoothly. Her husband arrived, signed the papers, listened to everything, and didn't say a word before leaving. He didn't even ask about their son. Apparently, he was pretending now that their son didn't exist. When Alex grows up, he'll probably act like he never had a biological father. Fina returned home, where her friend was waiting for her. She put her finger to her lips, indicating that the baby had fallen asleep. He wasn't feeling well and had seen a doctor in the morning. Fina had ordered a large pizza. Now that she had separated from her husband, everything had changed. After the divorce, it would be even easier for her to adjust to her new life, so Fina decided to celebrate this moment. "Well, here's to us," her friend said joyfully. They clinked their glasses almost silently, so as not to startle the baby. Fina felt freedom and long-awaited peace. "You know, I was really afraid that everything would be worse. I thought he might cause a scene. What if he had made a scene out of nowhere? I was so afraid he would come there with Vicky. Everything went just perfectly." Apparently, the first hearing made him realize there was no way out. "We're still going our separate ways," Josefina said. "Explain why your sister needed another apartment?" "She inherited an even bigger one than yours," Violetta said. Confusion was literally written on her face. Josefina looked out the window. The first raindrops were already splashing against the glass. A downpour was imminent. Fina felt it with her entire body, the anticipation of autumn, her favorite season. Who would have thought that this summer would so drastically change her plans? Months had passed until they finally got the divorce. She didn't expect alimony, didn't anticipate any financial assistance. Fina counted only on herself. Violetta repeated her question. Josefina nodded, as if still flustered. "She doesn't have any apartment," Josefina said. "Vicky wanted both of us to sell our apartments and use the money to start a business. Then, she said, we'd recover the investment in a year and buy new housing. We had a big argument over it. I refused to sell my apartment. Her business went up in flames, and she was left with no money, no housing, but with a lot of grievances. She found some Greek guy. As far as I know, she lived with him in Greece for several years and then came back, Josefina explained. Violetta still couldn't comprehend it. She also had a sister of her own, but she couldn't even imagine her sister treating her like this. Vivi looked at Fina, apparently about to ask about her husband, but Fina had no answer to that question. Diego's mother called me, Josefina continued. She said he's not ready for a family, offered to help with our son, but then she blocked me. Apparently, she changed her mind. Let them live as they want. It's not my problem anymore, Josefina said. They sat in the kitchen, chatted, and laughed softly. There was something cozy and homely in the atmosphere that made them want to stay forever. Violetta was preparing to go abroad for work. She had been invited to join a major company. Josefina was thrilled for her friend, but also envisioned how much she would miss her. Violetta would come back. They would go places together, take vacations. Yet, for some reason, Josefina felt that Violetta was leaving for good. Josefina saw her friend off at the airport a few weeks later. They both cried when saying goodbye. They knew they wouldn't see each other again anytime soon. Fina returned home, picked up her son from the nanny, and took him to the park for a walk. Alex in his stroller laughed. The leaves would soon turn golden. Fina looked at her son and couldn't be happier. Balancing work and motherhood was challenging, but Josefina preferred not to complain. She had her own apartment, a remote job, and a perfectly healthy son. There was nothing to complain about. She knew she could handle the difficulties that came her way. When Josefina pushed the stroller back to her building, she immediately recognized a car. Vicky jumped out of the car, looking disheveled. Her sister had arrived in such a state, which meant she would probably be asking for help, likely financial support. Fina had no intention of helping her. Vicky rushed to the entrance, holding the door. She rode the elevator up with her sister. We're sisters, after all. I don't want to discuss everything in the hallway, Vicky said in an irritated voice. Sisters? Somehow, you didn't think about that when you jumped into my bed with my husband in my apartment. Life isn't as sweet as you thought, huh? I understand that as soon as we got divorced, they fired him from his job. Since we're not together anymore, there was no strength to tolerate him at work either, Josefina said calmly. She didn't need to ask questions. She already knew how life would unfold after what they had done to her. Fina felt as if she had been shattered into several pieces. Yet, the young woman didn't just pull herself together, she became vastly stronger. Can you do something? Tell them to hire him back. Fina, I'll never work. You know how I feel about all of this. I won't be bagging groceries for pennies. Do you understand me? Victoria almost exclaimed. That's not how it works. What's it got to do with me? I won't help you or your loser. He's struggling with child support, you know? It's his child. If he ever remembers his son, tell him to text me, the woman said. She looked at her sister, but there were no feelings of kinship toward her. This was an entirely different person with manic eyes. She must have started using again because Fina recognized those eyes among thousands. Vicky clutched herself with both hands. Fina, I was stupid. At first, I wanted to take the apartment, but when that didn't work out, I decided to take everything I could. Everything always worked out for you, but not for me. You had a good husband, a child, and a great job. I should have something too, right? Vicky asked. Vicky, we're not children anymore. We don't share toys, we don't play in the sandbox, we don't pass each other a little shovel. We're adults now, building our own lives. You understand? I have all this because I rely only on myself. I work a lot and try hard for it. And you want to do nothing and get everything at once, Josefina said. Help me, Victoria pleaded. I can offer you a job, Josefina said. Victoria immediately grimaced. That option didn't suit her. She had no intention of working, especially earning her own money. Vicky had a persistent belief that work was for unattractive people. She had believed since her teenage years that when she grew up, she would have everything, but apparently, life had different rules for her. "I can't help you. Goodbye, Vicky." "I don't want to see you anymore," Josefina said. Vicky stood by the door for a few more minutes. She was still hugging herself with both hands. The girl slowly descended the stairs, sat on the very last step, and burst into tears. Victoria couldn't have imagined failing so miserably with her plan. When she got home, her lover would be sleeping on the couch. Most likely, he never went to a single job interview. His mother despised her. Vicky had almost no savings left. And what to do next? Victoria just shook her head negatively. She felt fatigue, disappointment, heightened nervousness, but still had no intention of going to work. She believed that if you send signals to the universe, it will surely respond. Josefina believed that working with her mind could achieve any goal. Perhaps that's why their lives differed so greatly. Josefina lived peacefully alone. She didn't accept men's advances and had no desire to enter into relationships again. The young woman was content with the life she had. She was currently raising her son, working, and striving for advancement. Josefina made happy plans for the future. Diego never showed up. The child support debt kept accumulating, and the enforcement officers shrugged, saying they couldn't find him. Fina stopped trying to influence her ex-husband, but she wouldn't lie to her child about his father either. Diego continued to live with Victoria. He didn't notice her destructive habit at first, which took a significant chunk of their budget. The man became afraid that he might also develop an addiction to forbidden substances, so he moved out. Several months passed, and he didn't try to reconcile with his ex-wife. He tried to find jobs that paid under the table. Diego couldn't even imagine how to improve his life, but he came to the conclusion that without his ex-wife, he had no life at all. A year later, Diego started communicating with his son. He got a proper job, paid child support, and visited the child. Diego was glad that Fina forgave him and didn't hinder his relationship with their child. They managed to establish a friendly relationship with each other, but this whole situation had taught him a harsh, albeit clear, lesson.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.